What do you think is the biggest mistake you see a young person make when they're buying their first house? What's your opinion on financing a car? Is that ever good? Why would that ever make any sense? What does a home insurance or home warranty normally cover? What's the biggest mistake that you see a first-time home buyer do, and how should they avoid that? So what are the factors that make appreciation happen? What's the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market, and why should a home buyer pay attention to that? What do you think is the biggest mistake you see a young person make when they're buying their first house?
Probably maximizing their budget, especially if, let's take someone that maybe recently married, they have intentions of starting a family down the road, but they've maxed out the budget on the house.
Okay.
If you're going to grow the family, you're going to have additional expenditures come up. So you probably shouldn't go to the max when you're going to have other events that are going to need income to support those events.
Okay, can you explain like the maximum budget to just like layman's terms of like what that would look like? Can you give a scenario of what that looks like in real life?
Yeah, so let's say, simple math, let's say someone earns $10,000 a month. From a mortgage qualification perspective, you can go up to 50 and sometimes higher, but let's just say 50% debt income ratio.
Okay.
So your payment could be as high as $5,000 if you had no other debt.
Right.
So let's assume there's no other debt. But if something happens down the road, you have to finance a car, you have a couple children, then you got daycare, you have no disposable income left over after, because you make 10 to bring home 7. If 5's going toward the mortgage, now 1,000's going toward the car, another 1,000 today, you're out of disposable income. That's the biggest mistake I see.
And you're saying 10 after taxes? Or you're saying 10 and then you have your taxes?
And then taxes, and then you bring home 7. In that analogy.
Taxes suck.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, what's your opinion on financing a car? Is that ever good? Why would that ever make any sense?
I think it depends on rate. I do like paying cash, but if you're at 0% or 0.9, hold on to your cash, and I don't see an issue with that.
Just like reinvesting the cash somewhere else would get you a better return than obviously spending it all in the car is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So biggest mistake, maximizing your budget, not leaving room for error. What are the couple mistakes that you see people do, when they're trying to get their first home?
In the last few years? I think the other issue is waiving. You probably don't see this much now, but in the last 2 years, you're writing an offer, you're going over ask price, you're waiving all your contingencies. You have no safety net. If something happens to the house, and I've seen it, it's happened to my neighbors. If something happens to the house, you have to redo all the duct work or whatever. The insurance is not going to pay for it, and neither will the home warranty. So let's just think at a margin.
Gotcha. What does a home insurance or home warranty normally cover? Again, this is if you've never owned a home before and trying to understand where you're protected, where you're not.
So a home warranty, if you get into the house and let's say the dishwasher breaks or the HVAC goes out, the home warranty would cover to replace that. Okay. If you waive your inspection, so no contingencies, the home warranty wants to see the contract and then they don't cover it.
What's the biggest mistake that you see a first-time home buyer, do, and how should they avoid that?
I see a lot of first-time home buyers overextending themselves on the house they're buying. So maybe they want to start a family, they don't have one yet. If you overextend on the home purchase, then you don't have enough discretionary income left over to do the other things that you also, family, vacation, future automobiles, etc. That's the biggest mistake I see. In the last 2 years specifically, probably inspection waivers. I want it. I don't care what it appraises for. I don't care what's wrong with it. Just waive it and let's go.
So an inspection, just in case you don't know what an inspection is and you're listening to this, an inspection is where you have a professional come in and they take a look at your house and they look for any like methane gases, radon gas, all these different gases, all these different like water damage, mold, and they can give you a really good idea if there's any issues with that house, and they'll give you a really good report. And if there's any issues, you can basically negotiate with the seller, right? So you can basically get them to fix it or give you money or make the house cheaper for you. So you really want to do an inspection because it's going to set you up a lot better financially for buying that house. And it may scare you away. If you get an inspection, you might find that there's like been mold in there that's going to cost $10,000 to fix. You're like, man, you know what? I don't really want to do that. But if you'll do it, I'll still buy the house. And then they'll be like, okay, we'll fix it. And then you buy the house and then it's fixed by the time you get there, for example. Because if you think about it, are they really ever going to sell that house if they don't fix it? No. Well, no, right? So then you can negotiate, right? So it's really important to negotiate buying your first home. A lot of this stuff's important about like thinking about your money. So if you're thinking about your money, if you make $10,000 a month, as Jeremy was telling me before here, you're going to have $7,000 left over after taxes. Don't spend $5,000 a month on your mortgage. Buy a house that is below your means. That's nice. That's clean. That doesn't have issues, but you want to invest in something that's going to grow and appreciate over time. So the biggest things to look for is really where's the location at, right? Are you in a really terrible place next to the projects, right? Maybe that housing value is not going to go up a lot. Or are you in like a nicer area where there's developments, there's new parks being put in? Those are the type of things you want to think about, when you're buying that first house. So that way you're going to be creating value over time. Because Jeremy, like, how do you, if you're talking to a first-time home buyer, how do you explain appreciation to them, or like the building of wealth in a simple way?
Yeah, and I try to discount the last 2 years because that's unprecedented. But yeah, if you buy a $400,000 house today, typical appreciation is 4, 5, 6% a year over time, over a longer period of time than the last 2 years. The last 2 years, I think sales price year over year, the median sales price in Knoxville's up 31%, and that's just year over year. I know folks whose home prices have doubled, new neighborhoods, etc. If you were the first one in a subdivision in the last 2 years, you probably doubled your equity or doubled in value. That's how the wealth builds. You have an appreciating asset. That's not like an $80,000 Denali that's worth $75 when you drive it off.
So like, what are the factors that make appreciation happen? Is it just market? Is it loan rates? Is it just, there's a shortage, or how does that kind of work?
I think rates are the carrot, and they have been up until the last few months. But no, just future sales. And I know we saw it in 2008. That was unprecedented. But it is very rare for a home to decrease in value. I mean, it would take a global depression. And we've seen one, but they're also up since that point.
Right.
So they rebound.
So like, why does a global depression change the home value in Knoxville, Tennessee, even if it's nowhere near it?
I didn't see too much depreciation in 2008, 2009. You saw more of that in the higher home priced areas like California, New York, Arizona. Knoxville's always been kind of sound. Now, some could argue that the prices of the last 24 months, maybe we're getting in that higher, but we're still nowhere close to Nashville. I mean, so I do not foresee values decreasing. They're stabilizing. You're not putting a house on the market for 4 and getting 5 cash. All waivers, all inspection waivers. You're doing due diligence in this market. You're getting the homes, So no, I don't think you're going to see depreciation.
Sure. What's the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market? And why should a home buyer pay attention to that?
In a buyer's market, you are going to be more prone to get a little help with closing costs. That's something the seller could pay. In a seller's market, if you look at the last 2 years since, COVID, we've had a lot of folks move into Knoxville. It's a seller's market. So they can say, they can list it over value. They can not want appraisal contingencies or inspection contingencies, but you're not getting that in this market because it's a buyer's market.
Right. So why does the buyer have the power now?
Well, rates are more than 4% higher. Okay. So activity slows. So when sales start declining and you don't see the madness that we've seen the last 24 months, the pendulum changes. And so values are still good, but it's more of a buyer's market now than it has been since COVID.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about rates, just for a listener who maybe has never heard of a mortgage rate before, what happens is when those go up or down, it incentivizes people to borrow or not borrow, right? So if you have a higher interest rate, you don't want to borrow as much because you're paying more back over the years. If it's a lower interest rate, you're more likely to buy. And so those rates have gone up to battle inflation, to make inflation lower. Just explaining it to someone who's never heard of it before. How do you describe like mortgage rates and inflation, and how are those related?
So I'll give you one quick stat. Last year you could have financed $800,000, and if you compare that to today, you could borrow about $475 to get the same principal and interest payment. So that's $325,000 in difference. Okay. Buying power that you lost from $299 on a 30-year fix to $699 today, or $7. Everybody's going to be different, but the average fixed rate right now is 7.038.
Oh wow. Okay. Gotcha. So the buying power, you said 200, how much thousand?
The difference?
Yeah.
325.
325,000. So
that's basically,
it's basically another house to get. Okay, gotcha. Because the interest rate. Describe refinancing, because one of the things that my wife and I are going to do is refinance when the rates come down. You buy once people drop their price, even though the interest rate is kind of high. That can be scary, but what is refinancing, and why is that a good thing?
So I tell folks, you marry your house and you date your rate. So that's a good thing you brought that up. So if rates drop to 5 or 4, whatever, and you're at 7, well, that's 3%. So on $200,000 loan balance, that's if you drop 2%, that's $4,000 a year. 2%, 200,000, that's $4,000.
Right.
So that's so you can save monthly. You can reduce your term and cut out. So maybe you keep the same payment because you're comfortable with the payment, but you go from a 30 to a 20. Now you've cut 10 years off. If your payment is $2,000 a month, that's $240,000 you're saving. That math may be incorrect.
Yeah, sure. But the whole idea though is when you refinance,
you're still reducing your term.
Yeah. So you're basically lowering your overall costs because the rates change, and when you lock in your loan, like if you bought a house at 2%, you can stay there the rest of your life if you'd like. But if you went in at 7, you always come down to a 3 or a 2, and sometimes it's actually better to invest in that because, for example, if there's 8% inflation and you have $100,000, well, your buying power is now 92 cents, for every dollar next year. But if at least you invest it in a house, although your interest rate might be kind of high, at least the house might appreciate, right? And then you can reinvest, or you could refinance, your loan rate to be lower. So that way that money's just not sitting around, for example, if you did have a lot of money lying around. Is that correct?
Correct.
Absolutely. So refinancing is a really cool skill.